I'm Allison, 27 years old, and I've spent my entire life living in my brother Ryan's shadow. Every achievement, every milestone, it never measured up. The comparisons were relentless, chipping away at my self-worth year after year. Then came that pivotal family dinner last spring when Dad looked me in the eye and said those words I'll never forget: "You'll never be as good as your brother." The familiar sting of inadequacy washed over me, but something inside finally snapped. My response shocked everyone, including myself, and changed our family forever. Before I tell you how I finally broke free from my brother's shadow, drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about family healing and personal triumph. Growing up in Boulder, Colorado, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial with the white picket fence housed what neighbors called the success family. My father, James, was a respected surgeon at the local hospital. My mother, Kimberly, ran her interior design business from home. And my brother, Ryan, 5 years my senior, was the golden child who could do no wrong. From the moment I was born, the comparisons began. My mother often recounted how Ryan had walked at 9 months, while I took until 13. Ryan spoke in full sentences by age 2. I was apparently a bit slower. These seemingly innocent observations planted early seeds of comparison that would grow into a suffocating garden of expectations. Ryan's academic brilliance became apparent early. By 3rd grade, he was already doing 6th grade math. His bedroom walls accumulated certificates, ribbons, and trophies. The living room mantel, what my mother called the family pride display, featured Ryan's achievements exclusively. School photos of us both were displayed, but accompanied by Ryan's awards. "Your brother got straight A's again," my father would announce at dinner, beaming with pride. "Allison, you should ask him to help you with your science. That C+ isn't going to get you anywhere in life." I still remember my first art contest win in 5th grade. My watercolor painting of our family camping trip had taken 1st place in the county competition. I rushed home, certificate clutched tightly in my hand, bursting through the front door to share my news. "Mom, Dad, I won 1st place." I shouted, waving my certificate and the small blue ribbon. My mother looked up from her design sketches. "That's nice, honey. Put it on the fridge." The fridge, not the mantel. The fridge where grocery lists and reminder notes lived. Meanwhile, Ryan's 2nd-place science fair certificate had earned a custom frame and prime real estate on the family pride display. When I was 12, I joined the school dance team. For months, I practiced diligently for our winter showcase. The night of the performance, I scanned the audience repeatedly during warm-ups, looking for my parents' faces. They never showed. Later, I learned Ryan had an unexpected study session for an upcoming AP exam. Of course, they had chosen to drive him instead. "It's just one recital," my mother said, patting my shoulder when they finally returned home. "There will be others. Ryan's education comes first, you understand that, right?" I nodded, but I didn't understand. Not really. What I did understand was that I was 2nd place in my own family. By the time I reached high school, Ryan had already set an impossible standard. Valedictorian of his class, perfect SAT scores, captain of the debate team, and accepted to Yale on a full academic scholarship. The local newspaper had even run a feature on him: "Local prodigy heads to Ivy League." Our refrigerator couldn't hold all the copies my mother had purchased. I tried. God, how I tried. I joined every club I thought my parents might value: debate team, academic decathlon, science Olympiad. But I was forcing myself into Ryan's mold, and it never quite fit. I'd stay up until 2 in the morning studying for tests, only to receive B+S, while Ryan seemed to effortlessly score perfect marks. The only class where I truly excelled was art. My teachers praised my creativity and technical skill, suggesting I consider art schools for college. When I tentatively mentioned this to my parents, my father's response was swift and cutting. "Art is a hobby, Allison, not a career. Unless you want to live in our basement until you're 40. He chuckled as though he'd made a joke, not realizing he'd crushed a dream. The summer before my senior year, Ryan came home from his first year at Yale, bringing stories of intellectual discussions, prestigious connections, and academic triumphs. Each family dinner became the Ryan show, with my parents hanging on his every word while I pushed food around my plate, feeling invisible. What hurt most was that I loved my brother. Ryan wasn't cruel or arrogant. He was kind, often unaware of how our parents' favoritism affected me. Sometimes he'd try to include me in conversations or highlight my accomplishments, but our parents would inevitably steer things back to him. Allison's art teacher said her portfolio is one of the strongest he's seen, Ryan mentioned one evening. That's nice, my father replied dismissively. Speaking of impressive accomplishments, tell us more about that research position you're applying for. By the time my high school graduation arrived, I'd managed to achieve a 3.8 GPA and graduate with honors, not valedictorian like Ryan, but still in the top 10% of my class. I received exactly 3 seconds of acknowledgement in my father's toast at my graduation dinner, and of course, we're proud of Allison too. The two said everything. When it came time for college decisions, there was never any question about where Ryan would go. Yale had rolled out the red carpet, offering him a full academic scholarship that made my parents burst with pride. For me, the conversation was very different. We've already put one child through an expensive education, my father explained as we reviewed college acceptance letters spread across the kitchen table. The state university has a decent program, and you can live at home to save money. The University of Colorado at Boulder was a good school, but it wasn't Yale. And it certainly wasn't the art program at RISD or Pratt that my art teachers had encouraged me to consider. But with no financial support offered from my parents and scholarship options limited, my choice was effectively made for me. It's practical, my mother added, patting my hand. Not everyone can be Ryan. Those words stung more than she knew. My first semester at UC Boulder, I dutifully enrolled as a business major, my parents' choice, not mine. I spent those initial months feeling adrift, going through the motions while my heart wasn't in it. Each Sunday dinner at home became a ritual of updates about Ryan at Yale, while my experiences warranted little more than cursory questions. Then I met Rebecca. She lived across the hall in my dorm, a vibrant art major with purple-streaked hair and an infectious laugh. One evening, she caught me sketching in the common room instead of working on my economics homework. "That's really good," she said, peering over my shoulder at the portrait I was drawing. "Why aren't you in the art department?" Her question broke something open in me. That night, over cheap coffee in the campus cafe, I poured out my family story to this virtual stranger. Rebecca listened without judgment, her eyes widening at particularly painful parts. "That's some serious BS," she declared when I finished. "You know you can change your major, right? You're an adult. It's your life." The simplicity of her statement hit me like a revelation. The next day, I marched into the registrar's office and switched my major to graphic design. For the first time in my life, I made a decision purely for myself. Of course, telling my parents wasn't as simple. Graphic design? My father's face had contorted like he'd bitten into something sour. What kind of stable career comes from that? Actually, it's a growing field with excellent job prospects, I countered, having done my research this time. The average starting salary is competitive with business graduates. My mother sighed dramatically. "I just don't understand why you always have to take the difficult path, Allison." Ryan knew exactly what he wanted from the beginning. What they didn't know, what none of us knew then, was that Ryan's perfect path wasn't so perfect after all. The cracks began showing during his 3rd year at Yale. His calls home became less frequent, and when he did call, he sounded strained. During winter break, I noticed him taking private calls, speaking in hushed tones. When he returned to school after the holidays, he left behind a credit card statement that had fallen from his luggage. Curiosity got the better of me, and what I saw was shocking. Ryan was thousands of dollars in debt. I never mentioned finding the statement, but I began paying closer attention to the dynamics at play. While my parents continued to praise Ryan's medical school acceptance, I noticed them writing more checks, having more private conversations with worried expressions. Meanwhile, I was thriving in my own quiet way. Graphic design combined my artistic talents with practical skills, and I discovered I had a knack for digital media and branding. My professors took notice, and by junior year, I was offered a coveted internship at a Denver design agency. It's one of the top firms in the region, I explained excitedly at Sunday dinner. They only take 2 interns a year. That's nice, dear, my mother replied, barely looking up from her plate. Did we tell you Ryan's been invited to a special symposium with Dr. Harrison Fletcher? He's the leading neurosurgeon in the country. My achievement evaporated into the air as insubstantial as steam. Rebecca became my rock during these years, along with a growing circle of friends who valued me for exactly who I was. Through them, I began to understand what genuine support felt like. They attended my design showcases, celebrated my wins, and commiserated over my struggles, all without comparison to some impossible standard. By senior year, I had built an impressive portfolio and made connections throughout the local design community. My internship had turned into a part-time job offer with the promise of full-time employment after graduation. For the first time, I felt confident in my path. My graduation day arrived with little fanfare from my family. My parents attended the ceremony, but spent most of it reminiscing about Ryan's Yale graduation. When my name was called, I heard their polite applause amid the cheers from Rebecca and my friends. At the small celebration dinner afterward, my father raised his glass to Allison, starting her job, and to Ryan, who just received acceptance to his top-choice residency program. Even at my graduation dinner, I couldn't have the spotlight to myself for one moment. As I prepared to move to Denver for my new job, I realized something had fundamentally shifted within me. I was no longer seeking my parents' approval with the same desperation. The validation from my professors, employers, and friends had begun to fill the void their absence had created. What I didn't realize then was that while I was building my independence, Ryan was sinking deeper into dependence on our parents, financially, emotionally, and in ways none of us fully understood yet. Denver welcomed me with open arms and endless possibilities. My apartment was small, a studio in the arts district with barely enough room for my bed and drafting table, but it was mine, paid for with my own money. The entry-level position at Meridian Design Group didn't pay much, but it was a foot in the door of a competitive industry. My days quickly fell into a demanding rhythm. I'd arrive at the office by 7:30 each morning, often staying until 8 or 9 at night. Junior designers got the grunt work, formatting client presentations, cleaning up senior designers' files, and occasionally contributing small elements to larger projects. But I threw myself into every task, no matter how menial, determined to prove my worth. Meanwhile, back in my hometown, Ryan had begun his residency at the prestigious University Hospital. My parents provided weekly updates whether I asked for them or not. Ryan assisted in a groundbreaking procedure yesterday, my mother gushed during our monthly phone call. The lead surgeon said he has the steadiest hands he's ever seen in a resident. That's great, I replied automatically, the response worn smooth from repetition. He's been invited to present at a conference in Boston next month. Your father and I are so proud. We're flying out to support him, of course. They had never once visited me in Denver. His apartment is just gorgeous, she continued. In that lovely building near the hospital. A bit expensive, but you know what they say, location, location, location. What she didn't mention, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that my parents were paying Ryan's rent. All of it. Plus his car payment, insurance, and supplementing his residence salary with regular gifts to maintain his lifestyle. 6 months into my job, I caught my first real break. One of the senior designers fell ill the day before a major client presentation, and I was asked to step in and complete his work. I stayed all night, refining the branding concepts and preparing the pitch deck. The presentation was a success, and the client specifically commented on the fresh perspective I'd brought to their rebrand. That evening, my creative director Sophia called me into her office. You really saved us today, Allison. That kind of initiative doesn't go unnoticed here. She smiled, sliding a folder across her desk. We'd like to move you up to the brand strategy team. It comes with a raise, of course. I called my parents that night, bursting with excitement about my promotion. My father answered, sounding distracted. That's nice, Allison. Listen, can I call you back? We're just heading out to a dinner honoring Ryan's mentor. He's received a major research grant, and Ryan will be working closely with him. It's a huge opportunity. Sure, Dad, I said, my enthusiasm deflating like a punctured balloon. No problem. He never called back. Instead of dwelling on the disappointment, I channeled my energy into my new role. The brand strategy team worked directly with clients, developing creative directions and overseeing implementation. The work was challenging and fulfilling, pushing me to grow both creatively and professionally. It was during this time that I met Jacob. He'd come to Meridian as a client, the marketing director for a local craft brewery looking to expand their brand. During our initial meeting, he challenged one of my concepts, not dismissively, but with genuine curiosity about my thinking process. "I see what you're going for," he said, "but I'm wondering if this approach might limit our growth with the demographic we're trying to reach." His use of "our" rather than "my" concept struck me. He saw us as collaborators rather than client and service provider. By the end of the meeting, we developed a stronger concept together, and I found myself looking forward to our next session. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship and eventually into something more. Jacob was unlike anyone I'd dated before, thoughtful, supportive, and genuinely interested in my work and passions. He asked questions about my designs, celebrated my successes, and offered honest feedback when asked. "You know what I love about your work?" he said one evening as we sat on my small balcony, looking through my portfolio. "You have this unique ability to get to the emotional core of a brand. It's not just about how it looks, it's about how it makes people feel." For someone who had grown up feeling perpetually unseen, his words were like water in a desert. As my personal and professional life flourished in Denver, the contrast with my family relationship grew starker. My calls home became less frequent, the conversations increasingly strained. Each interaction seemed to include some mention of Ryan's latest accomplishment, with little interest in my own life. What I didn't know then was that behind Ryan's apparently perfect life, things were unraveling. His spending had spiraled out of control, resulting in massive credit card debt on top of his substantial student loans. The gifts from our parents had become necessary lifelines rather than occasional indulgences. Meanwhile, I continued to build my career independently. 2 years into my time at Meridian, I was promoted again, this time to senior brand strategist, managing my own clients and small team. Jacob and I had moved in together, sharing a spacious apartment in a converted factory building with large windows that filled our home with natural light. My life had taken shape in ways I'd never imagined possible during those shadow-filled years of my childhood. I was creating success on my own terms, without family connections or financial support. The validation I'd so desperately sought from my parents had been replaced by something more substantial, confidence in my own abilities and worth. Then came the call that would bring all these parallel narratives crashing together. "Allison?" My mother's voice had that particular tone that meant she wanted something. "We're having a special dinner next Saturday to celebrate Ryan's new position. He's been appointed chief resident, the youngest in the program's history." I hesitated, mentally reviewing my calendar. We had plans with Jacob's parents that weekend, their first visit to Denver. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I already have plans. Jacob's parents are coming to town, and we've had this scheduled for months." A beat of silence. "Well, surely you can reschedule that. This is a very important milestone for your brother." The old Allison would have acquiesced, canceling plans and making the 6-hour drive home to sit through another dinner celebrating Ryan while my own achievements went unmentioned. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I can't reschedule, Mom. But please give Ryan my congratulations." Her disappointment came through clearly. "I suppose if that's your priority, your father will be very disappointed." The guilt trip was familiar territory, but this time it didn't land with its usual impact. Something had shifted fundamentally in me. Still, after ending the call, a lifetime of conditioning left me questioning my decision. Jacob found me on the balcony later, staring out at the Denver skyline. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting a mug of tea beside me. I told him about the call, the dinner, the expectations, and the entire history of Ryan's pedestal in our family. Jacob listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "You know that's not normal, right?" he said finally. "The way they treat you compared to your brother? I guess I've always known it wasn't fair," I admitted. "But when you grow up with something, it becomes your normal." He took my hand. What do you want to do? I considered the question carefully. I think I need to go to that dinner. Not because they expect it, but because I need to stop running from this dynamic. I need to face it directly. Jacob nodded. Do you want me to come with you? The thought of having him beside me, a witness and support in that challenging environment, gave me courage. Yes, I really would. I called my mother back the next day, telling her Jacob and I would drive up for the dinner, but would need to leave early Sunday to meet his parents for a late lunch in Denver. She seemed surprised by my boundary setting, but agreed to the arrangement. What I couldn't have known then was that this dinner wouldn't be just another exercise in Ryan worship. It would be the breaking point that would shatter our family's carefully maintained facade and force long-buried truths into the open. My parents' house looked exactly as I remembered: the manicured lawn, the carefully arranged flowers in ceramic pots, the polished brass knocker on the front door. Everything perfect on the outside, just like our family image. Your childhood home is lovely, Jacob commented as we walked up the front path. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, sensing my tension. Wait until you see the shrine to Ryan inside, I murmured, only half joking. My mother answered the door in her designer dress and pearls, her standard entertaining outfit. Allison, you're here. And this must be Jacob. Her smile was warm, but didn't quite reach her eyes as she assessed him from head to toe. Lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harrison, Jacob said, extending his hand. Thank you for including me tonight. We followed her into the familiar living room where my father stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, deep in conversation with Ryan. They both looked up as we entered, my father offering a curt nod while Ryan's face broke into a genuine smile. Allie. He crossed the room to embrace me, then shook Jacob's hand enthusiastically. Great to meet you, man. Allison's told me almost nothing about you, which means I have so many embarrassing questions to ask. There was something off about Ryan's demeanor, a slight tremor in his hands, dark circles under his eyes partially concealed by his smile. He seemed thinner than when I'd last seen him, his expensive shirt slightly loose around the collar. My father approached, extending a firm handshake to Jacob. James Harrison. So you work in beer, I understand. Craft brewing, Jacob corrected politely. I handle marketing and brand development for Aspen Ridge Brewery. Interesting. My father's tone suggested it was anything but. Not quite medicine, but I suppose someone has to sell the alcohol. He chuckled at his own joke, missing Jacob's slight frown. Actually, I interjected, Jacob's company just won a national award for sustainable business practices. They've revolutionized water conservation in the brewing industry. My father's expression remained impassive. Is that so? Ryan, tell Jacob about that revolutionary procedure you assisted with last month. And just like that, the conversation pivoted away. I caught Ryan's apologetic glance as he dutifully began describing a complex neurosurgery technique. This was the familiar dance, any spotlight on me quickly redirected to the family star. During dinner, I tried several times to share my own news. I'd been working on a major rebranding project for a national client, my biggest opportunity yet, and had just been informed my concepts had been selected as finalists. That's wonderful, dear, my mother said dismissively when I finally managed to mention it. Ryan, tell everyone about your new apartment. The view of the mountains is just spectacular. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's just an apartment, Mom. He turned to me. That's amazing about your project, Allie. Is it something we would recognize? Before I could answer, my father interrupted. Speaking of recognition, we should discuss the party we're planning for Ryan's appointment. We're thinking of hosting it at the country club. Dr. Winters is on the board and can arrange everything. I glanced at Jacob, who gave me a subtle supportive nod. Drawing a deep breath, I tried once more. Actually, I have some exciting news too. I've been selected to lead the rebranding for Westridge Hotels. It's a national campaign that could really advance my career. My mother smiled thinly. That's nice, dear. As I was saying about the country club, something inside me snapped. Years of dismissal, of being the afterthought, of watching my parents bend over backward for Ryan while barely acknowledging my existence, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. Is it really so hard for you to be happy for me? I asked, my voice cutting through the dinner table chatter. Just once, could my achievements matter too? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother looked shocked, my father annoyed. Ryan stared at his plate. Allison, my father said in his warning tone, this evening is about celebrating your brother's accomplishment. Every evening is about celebrating Ryan, I replied, surprising myself with my calm tone. It's been that way my entire life. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? I countered. When was the last time you asked about my work without immediately changing the subject to Ryan? When have you ever been as proud of me as you are of him? My father's expression hardened. That's enough, Allison. Your brother has worked extremely hard to get where he is. His achievements are significant. And mine aren't. We're proud of you too, of course, my mother interjected quickly. It's just that Ryan's accomplishments are, well, they're exceptional. I see. I folded my napkin carefully, placing it beside my plate. So I'll never be as good as Ryan. Is that what you're saying? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Then my father, perhaps tired of the pretense, sighed heavily. The truth is, Allison, you and Ryan are just different. He's always had that special something, that drive, that brilliance. You're creative and that's fine. But you'll never be as good as your brother. That's just reality. The words hung in the air like poison. Jacob's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tightly. Ryan looked horrified. Dad, that's not, he began, but I cut him off. Then ask him to pay back the $50,000 you've given him in the last year, while I've been supporting myself. My voice was steady, my gaze locked on my father's suddenly pale face. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Ryan's eyes widened in shock. What are you talking about? My father finally managed, his voice unnaturally high. The money, I said simply. The rent payments for this spectacular apartment. The credit card bills. The car payments. All while I've been working 60-hour weeks to build my career without asking for a dime. My mother set down her glass with a shaking hand. How could you possibly know about that? I didn't, I admitted. Not the specifics. But I've suspected for years that Ryan's perfect life wasn't as independent as everyone pretended. I turned to my brother. No offense, Ryan. He shook his head, looking almost relieved. None taken. It's time for the truth anyway. My father's face had flushed an alarming shade of red. This is completely inappropriate dinner conversation. Whatever financial arrangements we have with Ryan are private family matters. Exactly, I said. Family matters. And I'm family too, Dad. Or at least I thought I was. Of course you are, my mother insisted, her voice pitched higher than normal. We've always treated you and Ryan exactly the same. A short, disbelieving laugh escaped me. Mom, that's simply not true. And deep down, you know it. Jacob cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, I've only known Allison for a year, but in that time I've seen her incredible work ethic, her creativity, and her resilience. She's built an impressive career entirely on her own merits. Anyone would be proud to have her as a daughter. My father's expression darkened further. Young man, you don't know the first thing about our family. I know that Allison deserves better, Jacob replied evenly. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. That's enough. Allison, control your boyfriend or take him elsewhere. I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. We'll go. But first, I need to say something I should have said years ago. I took a deep breath. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done competing with the golden child. I'm done being the afterthought in this family. Allison, you're overreacting, my mother said, her voice pleading. Sit down, please. I'm not overreacting, Mom. I'm finally reacting. I looked at Ryan, whose expression held a mixture of guilt and relief. I don't blame you, Ryan. This isn't about you. It's about them, and it's about me finally valuing myself enough to walk away from people who don't see my worth. I reached for Jacob's hand, and he stood to join me. As we moved toward the door, Ryan suddenly spoke up. She's right, he said quietly. You've always favored me, and it wasn't fair to Allison. And she's right about the money too. I'm drowning in debt because I've been trying to maintain the perfect image you expect. My parents stared at him in shock, this unexpected betrayal from their perfect son seemingly worse than anything I could have said. "Ryan, not now," my father warned. "Yes, now," Ryan insisted, standing as well. "I'm tired of pretending too. I hate medicine. I've always hated it, but I was too afraid of disappointing you to admit it." The bombshell landed in the middle of the elegantly set dining room, shattering the last remnants of our family facade. My mother began to cry softly, while my father sat frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. "We should go," I said to Jacob, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the moment. As we reached the door, I turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I am proud of you, Ryan. I always have been. I just wanted the same in return." The drive back to Denver that night was mostly silent, Jacob occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand supportively. I felt hollow and full at the same time, emptied of decades of pent-up emotions, but filled with a strange new sense of liberation. The family dinner had been a breaking point, but perhaps it was one that needed to happen. The carefully constructed image my parents had maintained for so long had finally crumbled, revealing the complicated, messy truth underneath. What would happen next, I had no idea. But for the first time in my life, I felt free from the shadow that had followed me since childhood. Whatever came next, I would face it standing in my own light. 3 days passed in silence after the disastrous dinner. No calls from my mother, no texts from my father, unusual for a family that typically preferred to paper over conflicts rather than acknowledge them. I threw myself into work, focusing on the Westridge Hotel's project rather than dwelling on the family fallout. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Can we talk? Coffee at Horizon, 4 p.m.? Just us." I stared at the message, conflicted. Part of me wanted to maintain distance from anything family-related, but another part recognized that Ryan was as much a victim of our parents' dynamics as I was, albeit in a different way. "I'll be there," I texted back. Horizon Coffee was a small, quiet shop halfway between Denver and my hometown, neutral territory. I arrived first, securing a corner table away from other patrons. Ryan walked in 15 minutes later, looking even more haggard than he had at dinner. The confident posture was gone, replaced by slumped shoulders and a weariness that seemed bone-deep. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "Almost didn't," I admitted. "But we probably need to talk." Ryan nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I owe you an apology." "Several, actually." "You don't." "I do," he interrupted firmly. "I've known how they treated you, wasn't right. I've known for years, and I never said anything. I never stood up for you." I sipped my coffee, considering his words. "Why didn't you?" Ryan's laugh was hollow. "Fear, mostly. Dad's approval was like oxygen. I couldn't imagine living without it. And the more they praised me, the more terrified I became of failing." "The golden child's golden handcuffs," I murmured. "Exactly." He met my eyes directly. "But that's no excuse." I should have said something. Every time they dismissed your achievements or compared you unfavorably to me, I should have spoken up. The simple acknowledgement was unexpectedly healing, validation of a reality I'd questioned for years. "What happened after we left?" I asked. Ryan grimaced. "Nuclear fallout." Mom cried for hours. Dad alternated between rage and stunned silence. They kept saying they'd given me everything, couldn't understand why I'd turned on them. "And the money?" I asked the question that had been burning in me for days. Ryan's shoulders sagged further. "It's bad, Allie. Worse than you know. I'm over $200,000 in debt beyond my student loans. The apartment, the car, the lifestyle, it was all an illusion. I've been taking their money for years, trying to maintain the image of success they expected." "200,000? I repeated, stunned. "Ryan, how?" "It started small. Help with rent during med school, then the security deposit on the apartment. But the expectations kept growing. The right address, the right car, the right clothes to look the part of a successful doctor." He stared into his coffee. Before I knew it, I was trapped. Couldn't afford my lifestyle, but couldn't admit I was failing. "Why didn't you just tell them you needed to scale back?" "You've met our parents," he said wryly. Dad's favorite phrase was always Harrison's "don't do things halfway." The idea of his son living in a modest apartment or driving a used car was unthinkable. And I was too weak to disappoint him. A terrible thought occurred to me. The chief resident position, is that real? Ryan's expression confirmed my suspicion before he spoke. I was passed over. They gave it to Stephanie Chen. I couldn't bear to tell them I'd failed, so I made it up. The magnitude of his deception stunned me. So the dinner was a complete fraud, he finished. Just like most of my life for the past few years. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between us. What happens now? I finally asked. I've taken a leave of absence from the residency program, he said. Told them I needed time for personal reasons. I'm seeing a therapist to work through everything. And I'm looking for a small apartment I can actually afford. Are you going to stay in medicine? Ryan's expression shifted, a hint of his old passion breaking through the exhaustion. That's the strangest part. I actually love medicine, the work itself, helping patients. What I hate is the pressure, the expectations, the need to be the best at everything. I'm thinking about switching to family practice instead of neurosurgery, less prestige, but more meaningful patient relationships. For the first time, I was seeing my brother making choices for himself rather than for our parents' approval. It was both strange and wonderful. I think you'd be an amazing family doctor, I told him sincerely. He smiled tentatively. Thanks, Allie. He hesitated before continuing. There's something else you should know. After you left, when things calmed down a bit, Mom said something that stuck with me. She said, we only pushed Ryan because we knew he needed it. Allison was always so independent. I felt a complex wave of emotions, anger, vindication, and a strange sort of sadness. So their neglect was actually a backhanded compliment? I think in their twisted way, they thought they were doing right by both of us. Giving me the push they thought I needed and giving you the space they thought you wanted. That doesn't excuse decades of favoritism, I said, my voice harder than intended. No, it doesn't, Ryan agreed quickly. I'm not defending them. Just trying to understand how we got here. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of our shared childhood from our different perspectives. Ryan shared how our father's expectations had crushed him, how the pressure to be perfect had led to anxiety attacks throughout medical school. I told him how their dismissal of my achievements had shaped my self-worth, how I'd spent years believing I was fundamentally less valuable. I've always admired you, Ryan said as our conversation began winding down. Your courage to pursue what you loved despite their disapproval. I wish I'd had half your strength. His words touched something deep in me. We each did the best we could in a pretty dysfunctional system. As we prepared to leave, Ryan hesitated. They want to meet with us. Both of us. To clear the air, as Mom puts it. My immediate instinct was refusal. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I understand, he said. But I think they might be ready to actually listen for once. The fantasy they've built has crumbled pretty spectacularly. I promised to think about it, not committing either way. As we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, I felt the first tentative steps toward healing a relationship that had been damaged by forces largely beyond our control. The drive back to Denver gave me time to process. For so long, I'd seen Ryan as part of the problem, the golden child who made me the afterthought. Now I understood he'd been trapped in his own way, crushed under expectations I'd been spared. When I arrived home, Jacob was waiting with takeout and a sympathetic ear. I recounted the conversation with Ryan, including the revelation about his finances and mental health. How do you feel about all this? Jacob asked when I finished. Honestly, I don't know. I leaned against his shoulder. Part of me feels vindicated that the perfect image was a lie. Part feels guilty for feeling that way when Ryan's clearly suffering. And another part is just sad for all of us, Mom and Dad included. That's a lot to process, Jacob acknowledged. What about their request to meet? I sighed. I'm torn. On one hand, I've said what I needed to say. On the other, you're curious if anything will actually change, Jacob finished. Exactly. I looked up at him. Is it naive to think they might actually hear me this time? Jacob considered this thoughtfully. People can change when their reality is disrupted dramatically enough. Your parents' carefully constructed family narrative just imploded. That's the kind of shock that sometimes leads to genuine reflection. Over the next few days, I weighed my options carefully. The old pattern would be to acquiesce to their request immediately, setting aside my own feelings to maintain family harmony. The opposite extreme would be to cut contact entirely, protecting myself but potentially closing the door on any possibility of a healthier relationship. In the end, I chose a middle path. I texted Ryan that I would meet with our parents, but on my terms, neutral location, with clear boundaries about behavior, and with the understanding that I would leave if the conversation became unproductive. The stage was set for a family reckoning that had been decades in the making. Whether it would lead to healing or deeper fracture remained to be seen, but for the first time, I was approaching my family not as the perpetual afterthought, but as an equal participant with valid feelings and boundaries. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. 6 months can change everything or nothing at all. In my case, it was somewhere in between. The meeting with my parents had been tense but surprisingly productive. We'd met at a restaurant halfway between our homes, public enough to discourage outbursts, private enough for honest conversation. Ryan had arrived first, securing a corner booth and looking more centered than I'd seen him in years. My parents arrived next, both appearing smaller somehow, as if the collapse of their family narrative had physically diminished them. I'd arrived last, Jacob dropping me off with a supportive kiss and a promise to be just a phone call away if I needed an exit strategy. "Thank you for coming, Allison," my mother had said, her usual polish subdued. "We appreciate it." What followed was 3 hours of difficult, halting conversation. There were tears, mostly my mother's, defensive moments, primarily my father's, and revelations that shifted my understanding of our family dynamic. "We thought we were doing what was best," my father had explained, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Ryan seemed to need constant encouragement to reach his potential. "You always figured things out on your own." "That doesn't excuse ignoring my achievements or making me feel invisible," I'd responded, my voice steady. "No, it doesn't," he'd agreed after a long pause, perhaps the first time he'd ever conceded a point to me without qualification. We'd left that meeting with tentative plans to try family therapy and a commitment to more honest communication. I'd made no promises about forgiveness or returning to our previous dynamic, but I'd left the door open to rebuilding something new. Now, half a year later, I sat at my desk in my new office at Meridian Design, reviewing final proofs for the Westridge Hotel's campaign that had helped earn my promotion to creative director. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Just signed lease on new apartment. 1 bedroom, no view, can actually afford it. Progress." I smiled, typing back, "Proud of you. Real life, fake perfection." Our relationship had evolved into something I'd never expected, a genuine friendship built on honesty rather than the artificial roles we'd been assigned in childhood. Ryan had followed through on his plan to switch specialties, transferring to a family medicine residency where he reported feeling challenged but not crushed by the work. He'd moved into a modest apartment, sold his luxury car for a practical sedan, and was slowly working his way out of debt with a financial counselor's help. My parents were trying. That was the most generous description. Family therapy had revealed patterns going back generations. My father's own childhood under a demanding patriarch who had viewed anything less than perfection as failure, my mother's desperate need for status and validation after growing up in relative poverty. Understanding these roots didn't excuse their behavior, but helped explain the twisted logic behind it. Progress came in small moments, my mother calling specifically to ask about my latest project without mentioning Ryan, my father sending an email congratulating me on my promotion with no qualifiers or comparisons. They weren't transformed, but they were making efforts I'd never seen before. A knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. Sophia, my former creative director and now peer in the company hierarchy, leaned in. "The Westridge campaign mock-ups look amazing," she said. "The client is over the moon. This is going to clean up at the industry awards next year." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely pleased by her praise. "The team really pulled together on this one. Don't be modest, this was your vision. You deserve the credit." She smiled. Speaking of recognition, don't forget about the agency party tonight. Jacob's coming, right? Wouldn't miss it, I confirmed. After Sophia left, I turned back to my computer to find an email from my mother had just arrived, the subject line reading your feature in Design Weekly. I opened it with cautious curiosity. Allison, your father and I saw your interview in Design Weekly. We've ordered print copies for everyone we know. The way you spoke about finding authentic visual language for brands is something I finally understand. It's what I've tried to do with interiors all these years, just never had the words for it. Would it be all right if we came to Denver next month? We'd like to see your office and perhaps you could show us some of your work in person. Love, Mom. I sat back, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. The old Allison would have immediately analyzed every word for hidden criticism or looked for mentions of Ryan. The new Allison simply appreciated the gesture for what it was, an imperfect but genuine attempt at connection. I forwarded the email to Jacob with the comment, progress. His reply came quickly, definitely progress. Give them a chance to see the amazing life you've built. That evening, as Jacob and I dressed for the agency party, I caught myself studying my reflection with unusual attention. Everything okay? Jacob asked, noticing my preoccupation. Just thinking about how much has changed, I replied. A year ago, I was still trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see it. Now you know your worth isn't determined by anyone else's validation, he finished, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Exactly. I turned to face him. And I have some news I've been waiting to share. Jacob raised an eyebrow expectantly. Westridge was so pleased with the campaign that they've asked me to lead a special project. Reimagining their flagship properties with unique brand identities while maintaining overall cohesion. Ali, that's incredible. His face lit up with genuine pride, the kind I'd spent a lifetime seeking for my parents. It means significant travel over the next year, creative control over a major international brand, and I paused for effect, a budget large enough to hire my own team. You're going to be amazing, he said with absolute conviction. No one deserves this more. As we headed to the party, I thought about how differently I would have approached this opportunity a year ago, likely downplaying it to my family, bracing for dismissal or comparison. Now I could simply embrace it as the result of my hard work and talent. At the agency celebration, surrounded by colleagues who respected my work and a partner who valued me completely, I felt centered in a way I never had in my parents' home. I'd built this life piece by piece, on my own terms, without financial safety nets or family connections. Later that night, slightly tipsy from champagne and success, I texted Ryan, "When did you first realize you were actually good at something, not because of Dad's expectations, but because you knew it?" His response came as Jacob and I were getting ready for bed. First time I diagnosed a complex case everyone else missed. Patient walked out healthy because of MY judgment, not Dad's pressure. I thought about it, then typed, Westridge campaign. When I saw the final designs, I knew they were good. Really good. Not because anyone told me, but because I knew. That's the real success, Ryan replied. Knowing your own worth. As I drifted off to sleep beside Jacob, I realized that the journey from my parents' shadow wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about finding my own light. Ryan had found his too, in his own way. We were rebuilding not just our relationship with our parents, but our relationship with ourselves. The following weekend, I called my parents and formally invited them to visit Denver the following month. There would be boundaries, there would be awkward moments, and there was no guarantee of perfect resolution. But there would also be honesty and the possibility of connection based on who we really were rather than who they had decided we should be. It wasn't the neat, perfect ending of a fairy tale. It was messy, ongoing work, just like real life, real healing, and real relationships always are. 1 year after the family dinner that had changed everything, I stood in the center of a converted warehouse space in downtown Denver, surrounded by elegant minimalist decorations, ambient lighting, and oversized displays featuring my agency's best work. Music played softly in the background as catering staff circulated with trays of appetizers and champagne. Meridian Design was no longer my employer. Horizon Creative was my own agency, launched with the support of key clients I'd brought with me and a small team of talented designers who had followed me into this new venture. The launch party was both professional celebration and personal milestone, a declaration of independence I could never have imagined making 2 years earlier. Jacob appeared at my side, handsome in his tailored suit, handing me a glass of champagne. "The investors are impressed," he murmured. "Especially with the Westridge portfolio." I nodded, taking a small sip. "Where are they?" "With Sophie, getting the full presentation." I told her to take her time. He squeezed my hand. "Your brother just arrived." I turned to see Ryan entering, looking nothing like the polished, perfect doctor my parents had showcased for years. His hair was slightly longer, his clothing casual but neat, and his smile genuinely relaxed as he caught my eye across the room. Most strikingly, he moved with an ease I'd never seen in him before, the weight of impossible expectations finally lifted from his shoulders. "You came," I said, embracing him when he reached us. "Wouldn't miss it for anything," he replied, shaking Jacob's hand warmly. "This place is incredible, Allie. It's so, you." That simple acknowledgement that I had created something uniquely mine, reflecting my vision and values, meant more coming from him than it might have from anyone else. The sibling who had once been held as my measuring stick was now celebrating my success on my own terms. "How's the new practice?" Jacob asked him. Ryan's face lit up. "Challenging in all the right ways. We just opened a satellite clinic in an underserved neighborhood. The medicine isn't glamorous, but it's necessary, you know? Diabetes management, preventative care, community health education, the stuff that actually improves lives." "Dad still adjusting to the family medicine path?" I asked carefully. Ryan's expression turned wry. "He's trying. Last week, he actually managed to talk about my work without mentioning how I could have been a neurosurgeon." We all laughed, the shared understanding of our family dynamics no longer painful, but simply part of our shared history. "They're running late," Ryan added, checking his watch. "Mom texted that traffic from the hotel was worse than they expected." My parents had arrived in Denver the previous day, staying at a downtown hotel rather than with me and Jacob, a boundary I'd established that they'd respectfully accepted. Our relationship had evolved into something I'd never imagined possible. Imperfect but honest, with genuine efforts on both sides to hear and see each other. As if summoned by our conversation, my parents appeared at the entrance. My mother, elegant as always, but with a softer demeanor than I remembered from childhood. My father, still carrying himself with the authority of a successful surgeon, but with visible effort to contain the dominance that had once filled every room he entered. I watched as they hesitated, taking in the space and clearly impressed by the sophistication of the event. My father spotted Ryan first, nodding in greeting, then his eyes found me. Something flashed across his face, pride, perhaps, or surprise, or some combination of emotions I couldn't quite identify. "I should go greet them," I said to Jacob and Ryan. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck," Jacob replied, kissing my cheek. "This is your night. You've earned every moment of it." I crossed the room, accepting congratulations from clients and colleagues along the way. When I reached my parents, my mother immediately embraced me. "This is wonderful, Allison," she said, and I could hear genuine emotion in her voice. "You've created something remarkable here." My father extended his hand formally, then seemed to reconsider and pulled me into an awkward but sincere hug. "Impressive operation, Allison." "Very impressive." "Thank you both for coming," I said, meaning it despite the complicated emotions their presence evoked. "Let me show you around." As I guided them through the space, pointing out key projects displayed on the walls and introducing them to my team members, I observed my father's reactions carefully. There was none of the dismissive comparison I'd grown up with, none of the subtle diminishing of my accomplishments. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about the business model, the client acquisition strategy, the competitive landscape, engaging with my work as he might with the respected colleagues. "The Westridge campaign was particularly effective," he commented, studying the display of the hotel rebrand that had helped launch my independent career. "I noticed the implementation when we stayed at their Chicago property last month. The way you integrated local artistic elements while maintaining brand cohesion was quite sophisticated. I nearly stumbled at the specific observation. He had actually paid attention to the details of my work, not just acknowledged it in passing. "Thank you," I replied, working to keep my voice steady. That was a key challenge in the global rollout, maintaining the brand identity while creating authentic local connections. My mother touched my arm gently. "I saw your team member, Mia, I believe, mentioned you turned down an acquisition offer from Gloucester Media." This surprised me even more. My mother had done research beyond just showing up. Yes, they wanted to fold us into their digital marketing division, but we would have lost creative control. Independence matters to me. Something like understanding flickered in her eyes. I see that now. The significance of that simple statement wasn't lost on me. For perhaps the first time, my mother was seeing me, my values, my priorities, my definition of success, rather than measuring me against her predetermined expectations. The evening progressed with surprising ease. Ryan joined us, the four of us navigating conversation with new boundaries and newfound respect. Jacob appeared periodically, seamlessly integrating himself into family discussions before tactfully stepping away to give us space when needed. My parents made visible efforts to engage with him genuinely, no longer treating him as an appendage to me, but as a person in his own right. As the formal portion of the evening approached, Jacob caught my eye from across the room, giving me an encouraging nod. It was time for my address to the assembled guests. Standing at the small podium, looking out at the gathered faces, clients, colleagues, friends, and family, I felt a surreal sense of worlds colliding. The person I had been in my parents' house and the person I had become in my professional life were finally occupying the same space, no longer compartmentalized. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice strong and clear. Horizon Creative exists because of a simple belief that authentic connection requires courage, the courage to be genuinely yourself, to speak your truth, and to create from a place of integrity rather than expectation. As I spoke about our agency's vision and values, I found my gaze drawn repeatedly to my family. Ryan watched with open pride, occasionally nodding in agreement with my points. My mother listened attentively, a slight smile playing at her lips. And my father, the man whose approval I had sought fruitlessly for decades, sat with an expression I had rarely seen on his face: respect. In closing, I said, "I want to dedicate this launch to everyone who has had to create their own spotlight when they weren't given one. Your worth isn't determined by others' validation or recognition. The most powerful approval comes from within, from knowing your own value and refusing to let anyone else define your potential." The applause was gratifying, but it was the quiet nod from my father that affected me most deeply. Not because I still needed his approval, but because it represented how far we had all come. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, my father approached me alone, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Allison," he said, "I owe you an apology." I waited, giving him space to continue. "At that dinner last year, when I said you would never be as good as your brother." He paused, visibly struggling with the words. "I was wrong. Not just unfair or unkind, factually wrong. What you've built here, this is extraordinary. On your own terms, without my help or influence. Perhaps even because of my absence rather than my support." The acknowledgement was something I had stopped expecting long ago. "Thank you for saying that. I'm not good at this," he admitted, gesturing vaguely. "Emotions. Admitting mistakes. Your mother says I'm emotionally constipated." A surprising flash of self-deprecating humor. "But I am proud of you, Allison. Truly proud. Not because you've succeeded by some external measure, but because you've defined success for yourself." "That means a lot," I said simply, not trusting myself to say more without my voice breaking. He nodded awkwardly, then reached out to squeeze my shoulder before walking away to join my mother, who was deep in conversation with one of my designers about color theory. Ryan appeared beside me. Did Dad just have an actual human moment? I laughed, blinking back unexpected tears. I think he might have. The apocalypse is clearly upon us. Seriously though, Ryan said, his expression sobering. Are you okay? This can't be easy, having them here in your space after everything. I considered the question carefully. It's complicated. Part of me is still that little girl desperate for their approval. Another part doesn't need it anymore. But mostly, I feel peaceful. Like I've finally integrated all the different versions of myself. Ryan nodded in understanding. I know exactly what you mean. For so long I was perfect Ryan in their presence and disaster Ryan in private. Now I'm just Ryan. Imperfect, still figuring things out, but whole. As the evening came to a close, the four of us stood somewhat awkwardly at the entrance, navigating the new terrain of our family dynamic. We're proud of both of you, my mother said, looking between Ryan and me. Different paths, different strengths, but both remarkable in your own ways. It only took 30 years to hear that, Ryan quipped, but without bitterness. My father cleared his throat. We're trying, he said simply. Old habits, they're hard to break. But we're trying. And they were. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of reversion to old patterns, still occasional comparisons or dismissals that required gentle but firm correction. But there was also genuine effort and slow, steady progress toward a healthier relationship. After they left, Jacob and I finished saying goodbye to the remaining guests. When the last client had departed and only my core team remained for the after-party, Jacob pulled me onto the small dance floor. How are you feeling? He asked as we swayed to the music. Tired. Happy. Proud. I rested my head on his shoulder. I never thought I'd get to this place, professionally or personally. You did that, he reminded me. You set boundaries, you built this company, you redefined the relationship with your family. You did that, Ali. Later that night, as Jacob slept beside me, I found myself wide awake, replaying moments from the evening. I reached for my phone and typed a message to Ryan. Remember when we were kids and you won that science fair with the solar panel project? I was so jealous of how Dad looked at you. His reply came surprisingly quickly. Remember when you drew that portrait of Grandma that made Mom cry? I was jealous that you could create something so meaningful. I smiled in the darkness. We were always looking at each other, wanting what the other had. And missing our own strengths in the process, he texted back. Not anymore, though. Not anymore, I agreed. I set my phone aside and curled against Jacob, finally ready for sleep. The journey from that fateful family dinner to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. There had been painful conversations, setbacks, moments of doubt, and difficult boundaries to establish. The wounds of childhood wouldn't disappear completely, they had shaped us too fundamentally for that. But what had changed was how I carried those wounds. They were no longer festering beneath the surface, poisoning my sense of self-worth. They were healing, gradually transforming from open injuries to scars that marked where I had been but didn't determine where I was going. My worth had never actually depended on my parents' recognition or approval. It had always been there, waiting for me to claim it for myself. And in finally doing so, I had freed not just myself, but my entire family from the destructive patterns that had held us all captive. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about how life rarely gives us the perfect cinematic endings we might hope for. Instead, it offers us the chance to write new beginnings, messier, more complicated, but ultimately more authentic than any fairy tale resolution. In standing up for myself that night at dinner, in saying, then ask him to pay, I hadn't just called out financial hypocrisy. I had declared my right to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with the same respect and support that had been so freely given to my brother. And in that moment of standing firm in my own worth, I had taken the first step toward healing not just for myself, but for our entire family. What's your relationship with your siblings like? Has favoritism ever affected your family dynamics? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family healing and personal growth. Remember, your worth is never determined by comparison to others. It's inherent in who you are. Thank you for being here with me today, and I wish you courage on your own journey to self-worth.